Everyone, thank you all for being here. As the chair of the search committee, I get all the fun little responsibilities and trying to coordinate schedules and things like that. And actually, if it goes well, it's all Heather's responsibility, I think. So she's not here, but I thank Heather for that. I want to introduce Jordan this morning. A lot of you know him from his history here. You know about the background for the position. We have his portfolios available to everybody. Most are currently, Jordan's working with BP Petroleum on their biofuels thing, and Senator's going to talk about that and then get into a little bit about the position and so on. So thank you for being here and look forward to hear your remarks, Jordan.
Wonderful, thank you, Lee. And thanks for everybody for having me. It's excited to be back. See some familiar faces and see some new faces. So it's been wonderful. It's been 4 years now since I've actually stood up here and did my dissertation defense. Actually, 5 years now, 2009. So it's wonderful. And again, thanks for having me. It's hard to try to decide a title for this presentation, but really the title reflects the underlying theme of my vision for the extension program and research. So really outline of what I'm going to be talking about today is a brief introduction about myself and past histories here at UK and current position with BP. I'd like to talk a little bit about the Extension Farm Management Program and my vision and my approach to the program. I'd also like to give you an applied research example and then briefly talk about possible student engagement. So a little bit of introduction. I'm originally from the eastern shore of Maryland. A lot of people will say, well, that's Baltimore, isn't it? And I say, no, far from it. Actually, if you've never been there, it sits right in between the Chesapeake Bay and the Atlantic Ocean. And if you haven't been there, it's a very rural community. I grew up, my first job was on the farm. I worked on a poultry farm. Worked on hog farms, worked on buffalo farms, worked on grain farms, watermelon farms. So a lot of labor-intensive activities. Working in the chicken house is not very fun, whoever's been there, doing that type of labor. But left there, and most of you know that I am alumni of UK. I got my bachelor's degree in mathematical economics. When I was here, it was actually the first round of graduates out of that program. I specialized in operations research when I was there. At the time, I don't know if it's still the same, had the ability to specialize in econometrics, operations research, and one more I can't remember offhand. So I decided to do the operations research approach because it was more applied at the time. And then I met with Dave Freshwater. I believe it was 2005, walked into his office and gracious enough to offer the opportunity to come into this department and start my master's program. Worked under master's advisory under Mady, and then moved on. And while I was here doing the PhD program, Carl was on the lead of my committee for that, along with other various extension folks with Steve Isaacs and Tim Stombot of the Ag Engineering College, so a very multidisciplinary approach and extension applied research dissertation at that point. Then I did a quick postdoc appointment for about, I don't know, it was probably 5-6 months doing research, a little bit of teaching, worked there, and then went and took an opportunity at BP. So I actually work in BP's alternative energy umbrella. So it's a segment of the business. Really, BP is divided into what we call upstream, which is where they drill for oil, downstream, where they refine and market the oil and deliver it, and there's a lot of trading that goes on there and a lot of logistics. Then there's the umbrella of alternative energy, which consists of biofuels, wind energy, and then our Brazil biofuels. So biofuels that I sit in today is for the Americas, North America, and what our remit is to really commercialize lignocellulosic ethanol. So if those that don't know that, it's basically making ethanol from plant material. We use a biological process doing that. A lot of our scientists, there's about 140 of them in San Diego that are true molecular biologists that deal with enzymes and yeasts to convert sugars into ethanol. So being an agricultural background in an oil and gas company can have its challenges. A majority of my colleagues come from the oil and gas industry, petrochemicals, downstream, upstream, and really it's adult education every day. They don't understand agriculture. They don't even know some of them don't even know what corn stover looks like or a corn cob looks like. So it's continuous, and the need for us, my particular unit is growing because we're basically moved into a consulting role with BP for a licensee. So we now currently have a licensing model. We're trying to license and capitalize the value of our technology out in San Diego. And so we're the ag portion of the value chain to a licensee to make sure they have a true steady supply of feedstocks to be able to convert ethanol. So why am I here? I guess that's a question on everybody's mind, and so I figured I'd address it in this forum. Really, for me, it's not only just getting back into academics. I mean, a lot of people dabble in and out, and if that was the case, I'd be applying for every single farm management job that was out there right now, which I know there's a lot. There's quite a few. That's not the case. For me, this department, this university gave a lot to me. I mean, I spent 10 years here and gave a lot to me. I mean, I went to Europe before I went east or west of the Mississippi because of this department and this university. So really, to me, it's giving back to the state, giving back to this university, and repay them all they did for me. I mean, it's an honor, and really, it's the opportunity to really do and achieve the reason for getting my PhD is really to help farmers. And I think this is a great opportunity for me and for the state, and just, I can't, it makes me happy just being up here, to be honest with you, and get back in front of you guys. So that's really the motivation and drive for me, and why I'm standing here today, why I applied for this position. So, with that, a little overview of what my vision is in this extension farm management position and program. And really, it's solving real life problems for Kentucky producers. It's really what it boils down to, plain and simple. Really, what I like to focus on is new opportunities for producers, and whether it's a new crop opportunity or a new technology. And we had a few conversations this morning about this, hemp being a new potential opportunity in the state. I've seen mixed reviews on that, and I'd like to dig a little bit more deeper into that as a potential opportunity. Or, bringing my biofuels expertise in. And I know there's a big push around Western Kentucky and being further west about collecting residues for whether it's a bolt-on possibility or co-firing for cogeneration purposes, whether that's for the coal industry in Eastern Kentucky or doing a more strategic role like Abengoa or DuPont or Poet's doing with their bolt-on facilities to corn ethanol right now. That potential could be coming to Kentucky here soon. I know when we look at a lot of global market opportunities for my business right now, Kentucky in Tennessee is definitely on the radar. So it's not something hypothetical that a wish. I mean, there's people targeting these areas, specifically around the switchgrass and the miscanthus clay. So, and then new technology opportunities. There's some new machinery stuff coming out that farmers have to make a decision on, whether that's UAVs, which is the unmanned aerial vehicles, or people call them drones. I don't like saying that word, but or when I say variable variety, there's some new planters that are out there that can not only plant variable rates and variable spacing, but also can now vary by variety in the bins. And so there's a lot of new and improvement stuff going on there. So with that, fortunately enough, while I've been at BP, this was the past 2 years. For those who don't know, BP is a major project-oriented company. We build projects, and whether that's considered a major project, which is more than $250 million, major project, or smaller project, which is less than $250 million. There's a big push for project management. And so I've had the ability to learn in the classroom setting a lot of project management principles through, it's actually a joint degree per se, or certification with the Project Management Institution and George Washington University. So I'm currently holding an associate certification in project management and one more class away to get my master's certification in project management. So how does that really relate to an extension position? Really, it doesn't matter what size the project is, whether it's a $4 million or $4 billion platform in the Gulf of Mexico, or a decision by a farmer to purchase a new tractor. Right? It's still, you have to develop a business case, reason to make that purchase. You have to evaluate all the economic considerations of all the options for that decision. You have to develop what we consider a risk matrix. So, how is it going to impact my labor? How is it going to impact, do I have enough resources? Is there a risk to my business in some way, shape, or form? So there's a lot of underlying principles that go into oil and gas project management that's equally transferable at the farm level. And that's really what my remit has been for the last 2 years, is really trying to bridge that gap within BP of introducing project management principles to our R&D section and evaluating new opportunities from feedstocks and reducing costs. So to give you an example, we're evaluating harvest methods for our bioenergy crop right now. We think we have a base case scenario that works, but there's a lot of other new options out there because it's a new business in a new area. AGCO, John Deere, Case New Holland, they're all coming to us with new pieces of machinery to test. So you've got to evaluate those from an economics point of view. And so what's the business case? The business case is we've got to have the cheapest harvesting cost to be able to deliver the feedstock to an ethanol facility. We've got a list of options. What are the economic trade-offs and risks associated with those options? So we're going through that work stream right now. To dig a little deeper, what my core has been whole farm planning, and really within that machinery management. Whether it's machinery sizing, new technologies, how they impact machinery selection. And when I mean machinery, it's not just tractors. It's implements, it's harvesters, it's in some cases storage right now for us in BP. Breadth of like research areas. But really it all comes back to either having the lowest cost of production, in my case, or increasing net returns to the farmer, one way, shape, or form. So that's really my vision today of really going out there and solving real life problems. So I wanted to put this chart up there, and what this really highlights, and don't read it across because this isn't, it's just in a list format. But really what I wanted to put up here is just to highlight the breadth of my research and the depth and really the flexibility to be able to solve, as you can imagine, being in corporate America. Tomorrow, I don't know if I'm looking at Malaysian palm fronds. If anyone knows what that is, it's the leaf material that comes off the palm plant, or corn stover in the Midwest, or Brazil sugar cane, or even India sugar cane. Could be something new every day, which has been interesting. But really what I highlight here is I've done a lot of stuff in different crops and different technologies and utilize really different decision-making tools. And I could not do that without the help and the way I approach things in a multidisciplinary effort. I mean, with this, I've been forced to do a crash course in ag engineering with the technologies, agronomy with the crops. I work closely and have been ever since I've been here. We've got a team in Houston of 7 agronomists and 1 ag engineer that I work closely with. Have been for the past 4 years on that. And here, work with a lot of the extension folks looking at with traditional grains and auto steer at the time. So really it's about being flexible, being able to address anything that comes up from the Kentucky's producers' point of view and what they need to look at and what they prioritize. Also, ag has been pretty progressive here in the past 10 years, especially in the area of technology. So to be able to be futuristic, critical thinking, and be able to be flexible to solve these problems is key. And keeping ahead of the curve here, being up front and bringing opportunities to farmers. And maybe not necessarily opportunities come to them, but really it's about going out there, figuring out what's going to be out there for them to either reduce costs or make money, and bring it to them as an option. So, any questions so far on this table? I know it's a little busy, but yes, ma'am.
Under crops, the last one, why does it have to be non-GMO?
It does not. I just wanted it to. It's from the traditional grains. At that time, we were looking at specialty crops for the state of Kentucky, and one of those was non-GMO related crops, so more of the organic side of things, which also led into the edamame work that was done here, which is really an organic based crop that we were trying to introduce here in the States a couple of years ago.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
You didn't know Jordan was a tree hugger?
Yes, that's very true. You know me well.
Jordan, just real simply, there's a lot in the press about non-food crops utilized to produce ethanol, and the perception of a large amount of subsidy to make the economics work, especially $70 barrel oil. Where do we stand with a lot of these non-corn-based ethanol economics?
That's a very good question. In today's environment, with the technology we have, we need the subsidies. Don't get me wrong, we are planning for a life without subsidies, but it's going to take some time. I think there's two things going on here is the technology curve and the feedstock curve. Technology curve is the conversion into ethanol, and right now it's pretty high. And so to make the project economics work, you have to balance it out with a lower cost feedstock. And that's why you see the trend of companies going to a residue play right now, and especially in the US and in Brazil. And that's really the first play, because it's the lower cost feedstock. Now, when lessons are learned and new advancements in the technology brings the capital expenditure down of the facilities, we can start looking at where I dabble in a lot is the on-purpose crops, non-food crops, but which had a larger cost associated with them, which makes it not economical today, to be honest with you. And really it's going to be a struggle because we fight as a European-based company who has a more sustainable view on things in the U.S. that it's always, when I first started with BP, it was a food versus fuel. You know, we're going to go into marginal lands, right? Well, that's a view from an oil company not knowing really what they're talking about, because it's agriculture, right? If it could hold crops, it would be already growing crops. And the point of view today is we're going to have to go in and compete with food. I mean, it might not be the food crop, but you have to go into the land that produces food. Whether it's, you know, we did it in South Texas with rice. Probably going to go into some more row cropping area, not to wipe out everything, but as an alternative. But even with marginal lands, pasture lands, it's still food, right? So really, I think we're a little ways away, especially in the United States. I think you'll see it's a new technology, and with anything, there's going to be kinks and high costs. So we're trying to minimize all those risks up front and do some lessons learned before we start moving into the on-purpose crops, especially in the United States. That doesn't mean that we've got a global view on things. So U.S. agriculture is very advanced compared to the rest of the world. There might be some other opportunities in China and Malaysia, and there's some other places where it might be cheaper to produce such crops. But today in the U.S. it's not. It's not. The economics don't work out. Good question. Anything else? So, just want to discuss real quickly my approach to this. For those who don't know me, I'm a very personable type individual. I like getting out and talking to people. Got to do some of that earlier on at BP. Get out, talk to farmers. So really my approach is really utilizing, being an alumni here, I know and understand the value of the extension program we have here. And 120 counties, extension agents across the state, KFBM, worked a lot with some of that data back when I was here. And really, you have to utilize those folks as assets. I mean, you have to get out, talk to them, build a rapport with them, relationship with them, because they're the boots on the ground. You can't be everywhere at all times. And really understand, working with them to understand what problems their counties are facing. Because we all know it's all different in each area. And being able to gather that information, both to help them and to drive a research program, coming up with new ideas. I mean, a lot of my stuff that I got published was based on the work round. From the very beginning, from the extension folks, come up with ideas. We sit there and brainstorm with folks for hours and come up with some pretty good ideas. So that's kind of the initial goal. But really what's important that I've figured out over the past, didn't realize it because I've lived in a rural community my entire life, but really it's about relationships and relationship building. And really interpersonal communications, and it's a whole issue of basically rural sociology. You've really got to get out there and understand the communities, because we work from Texas to Louisiana to Florida. Every one of those areas is completely different. Louisiana, there are some rough folks over there. Good folks, great folks, but their drivers are different. You know, you try to go on and lease their land. What do they want that land for? They want it for hunting and crawfish. They don't care. I mean, they're producing rice, but it's not paying that much. But they want that hunting, and they want the crawfish. All different areas when you go down to Florida, which is citrus-based, high-value crop area, and just being able to communicate, understand. And it's no different than here in Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky is different than Central Kentucky, is different than Western Kentucky. You know, and just understanding the differences, the drivers, and the cultures, and why people make decisions. I mean, I've learned that time and time and time over again. It's very important to me, the second one. It's just building the trust. By doing that, you'll get ideas, and they'll be able to, you know, really trust you and bring you in, be able to help them make some decisions. Again, it's about client facing. I like meeting with people, whether it's, I don't sit at my desk, I'm a busybody around the office talking to people, networking. It's all about client facing. So what do I mean by that? It's all about boots on the ground, as we call it in Houston, and really talking to farmers, presenting, doing some extension publications, local and state presentations, workshops and seminars. That's what it is. And that's what I love to do. I love meeting new people. I love getting out and helping others. So that's really how I plan on approaching the extension program. Also, I talked about this briefly again, multidisciplinary. I mean, Steve informed me this morning that which opened my eyes about the breadth of research and extension in the farm management area that Kentucky's developing here. And it's exciting. I think there's a lot of collaborative work that can be done. I mean, Carl, you know me well and better than anybody here. I like brainstorming and talking. That's really my approach. I've learned so much from ag engineers and agronomists and plant soil scientists that opens up, I mean, it's just management decisions. It's whether it's an agronomy decision for the soils, or whether it's in machinery broken down, what do I do next? What's the next investment going to be? You got to have a good understanding. Collaborating with those, both internal and external. We get Tim Stombaugh in ag engineering, Chad Lee in agronomy. You just, there's great experts here. Draw on those resources, as well as external. A lot of my work at BP has been stakeholder engagement. So we bring in, we have different series every quarter of different businesses. First quarter was machinery manufacturers. So we'll bring in the global representative for AGCO, global representative for CNH, and John Deere, and just linking industry, the ag industry with the biofuels business. Give us an update where we are, what do you see coming down the pipe on the machinery side of things. We do that with other third parties and crop chemicals type work. So there's a lot of external resources that can be utilized. Also, obviously, a lot of this falls around grants and grant money. I think, unlike some graduate students, I was lucky enough to be involved in quite a few grants, both getting denied and getting funded, as we all know how it works. But luckily enough, we got 2 funded where I was co-PI on, so I have experience getting funding, and it was all applied research basis, a lot of precision ag work around that. So I'm not ignorant when it comes to getting grants and understanding the importance of that. So I know I've listed a few of these up here. Kentucky Soybean Board, USDA, and AFRI were some of the common ones a few years ago that I went after. I don't know what new ones are out there today and how, back then we were going through, the government was going through big restructure and how they evaluated grants instead of a bunch of little ones. Now it's large, big grants where it's multi-colleges, multi-universities, all that. I don't know if that still holds today to be true and how they awarded it, but with that approach, we attempted on that, doing a bunch of edamame work, and that was a massive collaborative approach that we attempted to get funding through multiple universities, approach multiple colleges. I believe there were 20 to 30 individuals on that edamame project right before one of the main reasons I departed, had to because of lack of funding, that didn't get funded. But again, not a stranger to achieving grants here at UK. You might notice a few wonderful faces up here. Some of you might recognize, some you might not. Carl, that's a wonderful smile. What I want to do here is highlight an applied research publication that is kind of an example of what's to come if I'm here. So what I want to highlight here, this is a extension-based publication, really, applied research. This is the Journal of American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. Here it's, the title of this paper is, you can't see it, is the influence of auto steer on machinery selection and land acquisition. And this was a joint paper between Carl, myself, and Tim Stombaugh. And so it's a multidisciplinary approach again, and this was funded by USDA series, one of our precision ag grants. They got published in it started in 2010, ended up getting published in 2012. So, who here knows what auto steer is? Let me ask that question first from the general. Okay, for those who do not know what auto steer technology is, at the time, 5 years ago, this was a luxury, high expensive item. For a farmer today, it's actually kind of come standard on most tractors. It is a device that basically bolts onto your steering column of your tractor and uses GPS signals to drive parallel swaths. And the benefits of that is reduction in overlap, reduced fatigue on the tractor driver so he can work longer. It's a lot safer so he can work a little bit more into the night. So really what auto steer does is allows the farmer to cover more acres effectively in a short, and it's a pretty simple technology today. Back then there were some complications. So we at that time we wanted to look at how does this technology, one, impact machinery selection decisions, because you can cover more acres now with this technology. So how does it affect your machinery choice, and also because you can cover more acres, how does it impact some land investment decisions? So really the first two objectives out of this paper were set up and we did some scenarios. So each scenario represented an objective. So the first one was really looking at, okay, if I was a beginning farmer and needed to invest in all new technology, how would my machinery choice change or differ based on with or without auto steer technology? The second one was, if I was an operating farmer and my machine broke down, needed to get repaired, or needed to change out, how does auto steer influence that decision? And the last two were around land. This was, so if I have a established farmer has a piece of machinery, how will auto steer, how can I increase my land area? Really is what the third was about. And then the fourth one is, if my machinery was at maximum capacity and you don't have auto steer, how much more land could you acquire by simply investing in this technology? How much would that machinery now support? So here's some of the underlying analytical procedures. We modeled a Kentucky grain farm, corn soybean rotation, typical. Really, this was a high-level machinery management model that encompassed various optimization methods. So we had some machinery selection, resource allocation, and sequencing. And really it's all about mathematical programming. That's what we focused on here. And the objective really was to maximize expected net returns by selecting optimal machinery with and without auto steer. So we evaluated both to see how those decisions change. So real quick, just to go over the results. Pretty interesting inference from this is that auto steer definitely does have an impact on your machinery selection decisions. Especially for a beginning farmer, one could select a set of smaller machines with auto steer options and cover the exact same amount of acres as a larger machinery and save money. So obviously with bigger machines, you're using more fuel, depreciation's higher, et cetera, et cetera. For the second one, auto steers found to increase expected net returns and allow for a smaller implement to be purchased. So what we looked at was you invest in the technology, or let's just say you're operating a 12-row corn planter and it breaks down. You can now invest, you have the option to invest in auto steer in an 8-row, then that 8-row is cheaper than 12-row, right? So you increase your expected net returns on that. And that smaller implement also could require a smaller tractor to pull the implement from a horsepower standpoint. Third one here is we demonstrated that established farmer with a current set of equipment could adopt auto steer rather than purchasing a larger tractor and planter to support land expansion. So what this was that, let's just say my neighbor's farm comes up for sale. And instead of that, I really want to expand my land. Instead of purchasing a whole new set of equipment to accomplish that, to produce it correctly, that you could just adopt auto steer and just cover more acres to support land expansion. And the third one here is indicate that as equipment operated at maximum capacity could actually support a 3% increase in land. So just from adopting the technology. So any questions so far?
And this is just bolt-on technology. It's not buying a new tractor with auto steer.
Yes, that's correct. At the time, auto steer was not standard. This was a bolt-on separate. You purchase it from the manufacturer for set price. You have the GPS system. At the time, had to pay for GPS signal. But today, it's a different environment. Things come a little bit cheaper now, and it's now, the majority of it's come standard. You just gotta let it ride. So again, just an example of how applied research, kind of summarizes the whole. This was a decision to be made at the farm level. There's various implications that it could solve. Its summary is easy. It can be published. It's good stuff that can be applied at the farm level. So. For those, so this was published in, the American Society of Farm Managers and Rural Appraisers. Here's just a list of some of the other applied research outlets where I've went to. Obviously, the first 4 are academic published or refereed journals. The GIS Applications in Agriculture was an invited book chapter that we did. Looking at CRP, precision CRP investment or enrollment. And then you can see a lot of national and international conferences. And I mentioned earlier that I was able to go to Europe, actually it was Greece, I actually went to Greece and to Holland before I went west of the Mississippi because of you. So, great time, good conferences, presented a lot of that. And then I was invited to be a speaker at the National Farm Business Management Conference when it was held in Hopkins, I don't know, it was Hopkinsville or Western Kentucky somewhere. I can't remember, it was just a few years ago, talking about profitability of precision ag technologies. So I'm going to talk a little bit about student engagement. I know this role has a small sliver of that involved in it. And first thing is teaching. Obviously what makes most sense is the AC 302 farm management. But really, you know, I did this when I was here as a postdoc, and it's the BA 599 class that's no longer offered, but was at the time when I was here, and it was a very, very interesting and fun class. It was a multidisciplinary class where we had a ag economics teacher, a agronomy time, and ag engineer. And I was one of the three at the time. I think Carl worked on one of them with me, but so it was the three of us, and we taught subsections, 1 hour credit class, and it gave the graduate students, and it was open to any graduate student, it wasn't just the BAE, so anyone could come in. And really, it was a great way to get a breadth, like an overview of precision agriculture, and different ways to look at it, how it works, the economics involved with it, some GIS stuff that we work with. So it was really fun, engaging, and unfortunately, I don't think the teaching appetite is there anymore. But something that, you know, if I come back, was a great class to teach. I really enjoyed it. But I think more so is the ability to share with students my past 4 years. Who in the room came from or has dealt in corporate America before? How many students go into corporate America from this department? Quite a few. And that's really what I bring. You know, I've learned a lot the past 4 years that I think it'd be a shame not to share. It's really getting students, and it's one of those things that, you know, unfortunately, I didn't receive it that well going into corporate America, kind of going in blind, especially to a major company like BP. It's really surviving corporate America and life outside of academics, because it can hit you like a ton of bricks if you're not ready for, you know, you can have all the underlying theory you want, all the analytical capabilities, but if you don't understand some of these core things that I've put up here, you're going to have a very tough time at one, excelling, and two, surviving. And you know, one of these is leadership skills. I mean, just understanding what it takes to be, you know, in corporate America, you have the leadership team, and there's multiple leadership teams, and you report. Well, that word's used very loosely. You know, there's very few true leaders that you can get behind in corporate America. And understanding those qualities, those traits, and what makes a true good leader, to understand who to go to talk to. I mean, it's something as simple as that, you know. Idea up here about emotional intelligence. Is anybody familiar with that word? It's the new, I don't want to say buzz going around corporate America, but it's becoming more and more, it's almost as valued just as much as intellectual intelligence. It's really about how to communicate, how to understand people, how to read people, how to understand, you know, what one person wants plus another. You know, I walk in someone's office, I can tell they're having a bad day. Do I want to tell them bad news right then? What kind of response am I going to get? So it's all about effective communication and being able to understand people, what drives people, what motivates people. Done a lot of testing within BP on, you know, they call it the SDI, Strength Deployment Inventory, which it evaluates you and how you respond normally under certain circumstances. It's a simple 10-question test, well, 20. 10 questions on how would you respond under good circumstances, and how you respond under adversity. And it tells you where you are in the matrix, and everybody in the workplace does it. And so you understand how people react under adversity, bad news, good news, whatever, and whether they're an emotionally driven person, well-being of others. Is that their drive? Is it analytics? Is that their drive? Or is it more control-driven? And how to work that. So it's been very helpful in communicating and working in a large corporation. So that's really important. And then, again, project management, I talked about that. Bringing that to students. And, again, it doesn't matter where you are. Those project management principles will be helpful anywhere in corporate America and in life in general. I mean, I've got to buy a new car. What's the first thing you do? You go out, you evaluate all the options, right? 1, 2, 3. I mean, it's a simple decision making, but it's understanding the underlying principles on each one, and especially at BP. It's interesting because they've got a little bit slight twist to it. Networking. Again, I like this one because at BP, it's not about what you know, it's who you know. I'll be honest with you. There are people in strategy roles that are chemical engineers. There are people in finance that are oil and gas roughnecks. It's not about your underlying skill set, what you know. It's who you know. So there's a big push on networking, getting your name out there, blindly meeting with people, getting to know people. So those top 4 things are really critical in really surviving. That's what I want to share with the students. I mean, you can't just walk in there blind and just thinking that you've got a degree in your hand and you're good to go. So there's a lot of lessons learned there. And then the last one, it's critical thinking. It's quick solutions, and it's being economical about your economics. Who's heard that term before? You know, really, in business world, you don't have time. You don't have 6 months to plan out a model and develop it and collect the perfect data and to take all the time in the world to deliver an answer. You've got 3 days. And if it's important, you might have 1 day, right? So you got to give them the best answer you can. And that's another thing, is being economical about your economics. Let's say P50 versus P90. They might not want the right answer. You know, it'd be nice, but I'm going to give you a deviation of 50%. It's 50, plus or minus 50%, that's your answer. Okay, good, we're good to go. So you don't want to spend time and all your effort. It's one of the hardest things I had to learn going from a PhD program into the business world is, you know, I'm used to numbers driven down. You know, the cost of production is $236.72 an acre. No, it's $400. Okay, let's just round it and go with it, right? So it's understanding that and be able to think and understand what the problem is, solutions. Critical thinking is key, and if you can't do that, it's going to be tough. So that's really, you know, from the student engagement standpoint, you know, there's teaching, but really it's, you know, bringing that knowledge to students. And you know, what I envision is an advisory setting with that once an extension program's done. And you know, if it blossoms is received well, maybe a 1-hour class on it. I mean, because a lot of this stuff, I mean, that all 4 of those, I mean, are 3-hour classes unto themselves, at least. So, you know, depending on how it goes and it's received, you know, it could blossom into something. So, with that, I think that's all I have Okay, is there any questions, comments? Great.
Jordan, so as you all know, I'm essentially you're interviewing for a position, one of the same, similar position that I'm in right now. So when I came into this position, I probably had 2 pages of ideas of things I wanted to work on when I got here. And I found out somewhere probably about 6 to 9 months in terms of which ones were realistic. And that was probably 10% of what I had on that original list. So I guess what I'm trying to get to is someone in this position has got to be very flexible in terms of what their interests are, and I understand that's important, but also matching those with the needs and you know, what the key issues are right now with the farmers out there. So just picking kind of 2 key sectors in Kentucky ag, what do you think those key issues are right now in both the grain sector and maybe the livestock sector, and maybe trying to point out how you could adapt if needed, you know, from what your stated interests are in topic areas in terms of meeting those?
So for the grain sector, I mean, I think today with prices being so volatile, I mean, cost control is important. And understanding your cost structure, managing your cost structure and being able to reduce your cost. Because the market's the market. I mean, you can plan for, you can do some marketing to hedge, but I think cost control is important for that. And I think that the flexibility that I showed here is, it's not, I want to solve everything. It's saying I have the ability to solve what the farmers need. So it's reading that. And I think that's very important. And as far as the livestock side goes,
Staying with grain, what do you think probably the one key cost that farmers are most concerned about right now in the grain sector?
probably fertilizer costs or water, depending on where you are.
It's land rents right now, by far. I mean, factor 10 to 1. So what do you think you could do in that area?
That's a good question.
All the other costs right now are going to be insignificant compared to land rents.
What are land rents running right now? Are they pushing?
Depends on the area. The high end are $400.
I think you have to then go into more contracting strategy and how you would try to increase your profits by developing a new contracting strategy. So instead of straight out cash rent, you know, do you try to do a mixed type approach to contracting for the landowner? I think that's one way to be able to do it.
So something other than a cash rent?
Yes. I think looking at alternative crops to be able to subsidize those high cash rents right now. What that is today, I don't know. But having a higher value enterprise that you're growing on that land, you've got to get more out of that land.
Hemp?
I'm not saying, I'm just reading what's new in Kentucky. I don't know the cost structure of hemp or
That's a joke.
the ability, but so that's kind of, I mean, what I think right now is, you know,
Okay, what about the cattle side?
you know what, I don't dabble in cattle that much. The livestock side is not my.
So
my
you
expertise.
realize about 80% of our farms here are cattle farms.
Yes, yes, I do. So that's something I definitely have to learn. I think it's another area. I mean, I've done crops. I've worked on farms my entire life, and so it's not. I don't understand the nuances and intricacies with the cattle market here. So it's something that I would have to learn. Sure.
Yeah. How would you go about doing that?
Oh, reaching out to the experts. I mean, we've got internal expertise here with you and Kenny, and external. I mean, A lot of the farmers are doing mixed type enterprises with grains and cattle. Get out there and learn what the issues are. Again, it's a grassroots approach. I mean, boots on the ground. You gotta learn if there's a problem or an issue or an opportunity. But I would not come in here and claim to be an expert in cattle. We have expertise, but where I could help, you know, anywhere I can see fit. I mean, it's not, you know, that won't be my niche.
So what if the demand was that you focus a large part of your time in that area? Would that be something you'd be comfortable with?
It's something I'll have to adapt to. I mean, I think showing up here, just the variability and being able to flex. I mean, if the demand's there and needs to be, it's something I can learn. I walked into BP not knowing a single thing about energy cane or crop or perennial crops at that. And I think in-house we're one of the most experts in energy cane in the world. So I had to learn it. And something I'd do again. It's not a big deal.
So that wouldn't be a problem then?
No.
Okay.
Not at all.
Dave? The farmers buy equipment when they've got a lot of money, and they really like to buy equipment when Section 179 provision is $500,000. It's back down to $15,000 or $25,000. But we've got a whole bunch of farmers that bought a lot of equipment up through last year, and they're probably not going to buy much equipment now. There's a couple of reasons. One is they can't expense it, and the second one is they don't have as much money. But so what does that, you know, your expertise certainly seems to be in the mechanization part of farming. How's that going to play out in terms of what goes on farms?
I think you have to be really careful. I mean, I think there's always this machinery bubble, right? And like you talked about, high prices, things are good, buy all new machinery, and you're seeing what happens. Crop prices aren't there. We do high land rents. You're in a bind. And
Well, are you in a bind because you've got all this machinery?
well, it depends on how you purchased it, right? I mean, was it cash, out of pocket, and you paid for it, and now you're doing all right. But if you're borrowing on that, I think you got to make payments. I think you're in a tough decision.
So what's the, you know, what are the implications of, you know?
I think there's going to be potentially a flood of used machinery out there. There already is. And it's probably going to go export out of the country or sold internally. I mean, South America's getting a lot of machines coming from the United States. So that's my
Last question, we're right about out of time.
The last question.
The last question for
Well,
this
I sit
session.
back here and remember there are 60,000 farmers out there. What does that, I mean, even, sure their cash rent's $40 an acre. I mean, how you, and they have this equipment that they bought 2 years ago when they had a lot of money. How are you going to attack that?
I think it's about, if they are keeping machinery, it's making the most out of that piece of machinery. I mean, you've got to cover more acres, you've got to cover more land with that piece of machinery. If you've got it, that's what you have to do. And to facilitate that and encourage that. I mean, it does no good having a $250,000, $300,000 piece of machinery and only 1,000 acres to sit on. You know, and maybe that decision was a risk decision for whether and bigger machinery, but you got to put more grain through that machine, more acres.
We're out of acres here in Kentucky, unfortunately.
Well, not some people to wonder.
Well, Jordan, okay, we'll go.
Just one quick
Sure.
question. So Jordan, are you aware of any funding sources within BP that are applicable to this
That's-
biofuel? When you think about it?
That's a very good point, real quick, and I do want to address that. From our standpoint, there's a reluctancy to go to universities simply because of the politics involved and the paperwork and the who owns the intellectual property. It's a huge issue. However, we do work with University of Florida, we do work with Texas A&M, and we do work LSU, and we do work at USDA Homa, and have collaborative approaches internally. But it's tough to do that if it wasn't established a while ago. The company we both luckily all had agreements in place already, so we had to restructure them a little bit. But I think for the biofuels industry to be able to kickstart this in the United States, you have to, if you're a private company, you have to have public support, because the farmers don't know about the crops that are growing, and they need the information from a reputable source, someone they trust. And that's going to come from extension agents, land-grant universities, whomever, besides a big company like BP saying, hey, trust us, this is how you grow it. And it's an oil and gas company. It's not going to work. And we're realizing that right now. So, to your point, the movement, I think in the next year or two, there will be a lot of private funding from the universities, because the realization of that's the venue that the farmers want to receive information.
Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you.
2 or 7 more questions, but I think everybody has opportunity.